The silence on the bridge of the UES Defiant was thick enough to cut with a knife. Captain John Blake stared at the massive alien ships that had appeared out of nowhere, their dark hulls gleaming like oil slicks against the starfield. Lisa Martinez stood at her engineering station, watching the readouts that told a story no human had ever seen before. 7 different ship designs, each one bigger than anything Earth had ever built, all pointing weapons at their small exploration vessel. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures from at least 40 ships." Danny Rodriguez called out from his position at tactical. His voice was steady, but Lisa could hear the fear underneath. They all felt it. This was supposed to be a routine deep space mission, pushing further from Earth than any human had gone before. Instead, they had stumbled into something that would change everything. The communication array crackled to life. The voice that came through was cold and mechanical, speaking perfect English with an accent that sounded like grinding metal. "Primitive vessel, you have entered space, controlled by the hegemony. State your purpose or be destroyed." Captain Blake straightened his uniform and stepped forward. Lisa watched him take a deep breath before responding. "This is Captain John Blake of the United Earth ship Defiant. We come in peace, seeking contact with other intelligent species. We mean no harm." A sound came through the speakers that might have been laughter, but it was harsh and bitter. "Peace, how amusing. We are Zexthura of the Hegemony Council. Your species is unknown to us. You will submit to boarding and inspection, or you will be eliminated." "Sir," Lisa whispered to the captain, "our shields are holding, but these energy readings are off the charts. If they fire on us, we won't last 5 seconds." Blake nodded grimly. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Zexthura, we are willing to talk. We have no desire for conflict. Perhaps we can reach an understanding." The alien's response came faster than expected. "Understanding? You think your primitive minds can comprehend the hegemony? We have ruled this sector for 3,000 of your years. We have seen 100 species rise and fall. You are nothing new, nothing special, nothing worthy of our time." The ship shuddered as something hit their shields. Not enough to damage them, but enough to send a clear message. Lisa's hands flew over her console, checking system status. Everything was still green, but barely. "That was a warning," Zexthura continued. "The next shot will cripple your vessel. You have 10 of your minutes to decide. Surrender one of your crew to be left on the dead world of Cathara Prime as proof of your submission, and the rest may flee back to whatever hole you crawled from. Refuse, and we will destroy you all and take your ship as scrap metal." The bridge fell silent. Lisa could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Everyone was looking at Captain Blake, waiting for his decision, knowing there really wasn't a choice. Through the view screen, she could see more alien ships moving into position. They were surrounded completely. "A hostage," Blake said quietly. "They want a human hostage." "More than that, sir," Danny said, his voice tight. "They want someone to die on this Cathara Prime. From the way they're talking, it's not meant to be temporary." Lisa stepped away from her station. She had been thinking about this from the moment the alien made his demand. In her mind, she had already run through all the possibilities, all the options, all the ways this could end. There was only one choice that made sense. "I'll go," she said. Every head on the bridge turned to look at her. Captain Blake's face went pale. "Lisa, no, we don't negotiate with terrorists, human or alien." "Sir, with respect, we're not in a position to take the high ground here," Lisa replied. She gestured toward the view screen where the alien fleet waited like hungry wolves. "Look at those ships. Look at their weapons. We came out here to explore, not to fight. We're not equipped for this kind of battle. We don't leave crew behind," Blake said firmly. "That's not how we operate, and we don't let entire crews die for pride either," Lisa shot back. She moved closer to the captain, lowering her voice. "Sir, I'm the logical choice. I'm the chief engineer and survival specialist. If anyone has a chance of lasting more than A few days on this planet, it's me. Plus, someone needs to get word back to Earth about what we found out here. Danny stepped forward from his station. Lisa, don't be crazy. We can't just throw you away like this. You're not throwing me away, Lisa said, turning to face her friend. You're giving me a chance to save everyone else. And maybe, just maybe, I can find a way to survive long enough for Earth to send help. The communication system crackled again. Your time grows short, humans. Choose quickly, or we choose for you. Captain Blake closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Lisa could see the pain there. I can't order you to do this. You're not ordering me, sir. I'm volunteering. The planet they mentioned, Cathara Prime, Blake said. We don't know anything about it. The conditions, the atmosphere, whether it's even possible to survive there. I know, Lisa said simply. But I also know that if we try to fight or run, we all die right here, right now. At least this way, most of us get to go home. The minutes ticked by slowly. Lisa could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. She thought about her life back on Earth, about the family she might never see again, about all the things she would miss. But she also thought about the crew around her. Good people who deserved a chance to see their own families again. Time is up, humans. Zext Thora's voice cut through the silence. What is your answer? Captain Blake looked at Lisa one more time. She nodded to him, trying to smile despite the fear that was eating at her stomach. Tell them yes, she said, but I have conditions. Blake raised an eyebrow. Conditions. I want basic survival gear. Shelter, food, water, purification, medical supplies, tools. If they want me to last more than a day, they need to give me a fighting chance. And if they refuse, Lisa shrugged. Then you know they were planning to kill us all anyway, and you. Run for home as fast as this ship can fly. Blake took a deep breath and opened the channel. Zexthora, we agree to your terms. Lieutenant Commander Martinez will surrender herself to be left on Cathara Prime. In exchange, you allow my ship and the rest of my crew to return to Earth safely. Acceptable, came the immediate reply. Your volunteer will be provided with basic survival equipment suitable for a primitive species. Transport to Cathara Prime will commence immediately. Any attempt at trickery will result in the destruction of your vessel. Lisa felt a strange calm settle over her as she prepared for what might be the last few hours of her life. She gathered her personal effects, checked her equipment, and said goodbye to each member of the crew. Some of them cried. Some of them tried to talk her out of it, even at this late moment. All of them understood that she was giving her life so they could keep theirs. When the alien transport ship docked with the Defiant, Lisa walked aboard without looking back. She knew that if she turned around, if she saw the faces of her friends one more time, she might lose her nerve. The alien ship was dark and cold, filled with strange smells and stranger sounds. She was alone now, heading toward a world that was supposed to be her grave, carried by creatures who saw her as less than nothing. But Lisa Martinez had never been one to give up without a fight, and she wasn't about to start now. The landing pod hit the surface of Cathara Prime with a bone-jarring thud that rattled Lisa's teeth. Through the small window, she could see nothing but endless rocky plains stretching to the horizon under a dim red sun that looked like it was dying. The alien who had piloted the pod turned to look at her with eyes that glowed like yellow coals in the darkness. This is where you will spend your final days, human, the creature said in its grinding voice. Consider it an honor. Few species have been given the privilege of dying on Cathara Prime. The planet will consume you as it has consumed all life before you. The pod's door hissed open, letting in air that was thin and cold and tasted of metal and dust. Lisa grabbed her survival pack and stepped out onto the alien world. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel bouncy and strange. Behind her, the pod's door slammed shut, with a finality that echoed across the barren landscape. She watched as the small ship lifted off and disappeared into the red-tinged sky, leaving her completely alone on a world that looked like the surface of hell. The silence was absolute. No wind, no birds, no insects, no sound at all, except her own breathing inside the environmental suit that was keeping her alive. Lisa took stock of her situation. The survival pack contained enough food for maybe 10 days, if she was careful. Water, for a week. Oxygen for her suit would last about 3 days before she would need to find another source or figure out if the planet's atmosphere was even breathable. She had basic tools, a small shelter unit, medical supplies, and a scanner that could detect water, minerals, and life signs. The first thing she did was scan the immediate area. The results were not encouraging. No water sources detected. Life signs whatsoever. The atmospheric readings showed the air was mostly nitrogen and carbon dioxide with trace amounts of oxygen, but not enough to breathe safely. The temperature was hovering around freezing and would drop much lower when the red sun set. Lisa set up her emergency shelter in the shadow of a large rock formation that would provide some protection from the wind that was starting to pick up. The shelter was a basic dome that could keep the worst of the cold out, but it would not last long against the harsh conditions of this world. She needed to find something better, and she needed to find it fast. While she worked, Lisa thought about what the alien had said about this planet consuming all life. That suggested there had been life here once. If living things had existed here before, then there might be traces of them somewhere. Water sources that had dried up, cave systems that might provide better shelter, maybe even remnants of whatever civilization had lived here. She activated her scanner and began a more detailed sweep of the area. The device was designed for basic geological surveys, but Lisa had modified it during her time on the Defiant to pick up a wider range of signatures. As she slowly turned in a circle, letting the scanner map the terrain, she began to notice something interesting. About 2 kilometers to the north, there was what looked like a series of underground chambers. The scanner was having trouble getting clear readings at that distance, but there were definitely empty spaces beneath the surface. More importantly, there seemed to be temperature variations that suggested some kind of geothermal activity. Lisa packed up her shelter and began walking toward the underground chambers. The landscape was treacherous, full of sharp rocks and sudden drops that could easily break an ankle, or worse. Every step had to be planned carefully. The lighter gravity helped, but it also made it easy to misjudge distances and land awkwardly. As she got closer to her destination, the scanner began picking up more interesting readings. There were definitely artificial structures below ground, not just caves, but constructed spaces with regular shapes and what looked like corridors connecting them. This had been built by intelligent beings, not carved by natural forces. She found the entrance almost by accident. What looked like just another rock outcropping turned out to be a carefully camouflaged doorway. When she got close enough, her scanner detected a faint energy signature coming from somewhere deep inside the structure. Something down there was still powered, after who knew how many years. The entrance was partially blocked by fallen rocks, but there was enough space for her to squeeze through if she was careful. Lisa hesitated for a moment. Going underground on an alien world was risky in ways she could not even imagine, but staying on the surface was certain death. And at least below ground she might find shelter from the killing cold. She activated the light on her scanner and stepped into the darkness beyond the entrance. The corridor was wide enough for her to walk upright and seemed to stretch far into the distance. The walls were smooth and made of some kind of stone or metal that her light could not quite identify. There were markings along the walls that looked like writing, but in a script unlike anything she had ever seen. As she walked deeper into the complex, Lisa began to notice that the temperature was rising slightly. Not much, but enough to suggest that whatever geothermal activity was heating this place was still functioning. The air seemed cleaner too, though she kept her environmental suit sealed, just in case. The first chamber she found was huge, easily the size of a football field, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above her head. Along the walls were what looked like control panels or computer terminals, all dark and silent. In the center of the room was a raised platform with something on it that might have been a chair or throne, though it was designed for a body shape, very different from human. Lisa approached one of the wall panels and ran her scanner over it. The device immediately began beeping excitedly. There was power running through the systems, just barely, like a heartbeat that was almost stopped. Some kind of standby mode that had been running for centuries, or maybe thousands of years. She found water in the third chamber. She explored. Not much, just a trickle coming from a crack in the wall, but it was clean and fresh, according to her scanner. She set up collection containers and began the slow process of gathering enough to refill her water supplies. While the containers filled, Lisa explored more of the complex. She found living quarters with furniture sized for beings about her own height, storage areas filled with objects she could not identify, workshops containing tools and equipment that looked incredibly advanced despite their obvious age. In one room, she found what looked like a library. The walls were covered with panels that displayed symbols and pictures when she got close to them. Her scanner could not translate the alien writing, but some of the pictures were clear enough. These showed the planet as it had been, green and blue, with oceans and forests and cities. Other images showed the gradual death of the world, the waters drying up, the plants withering, the sun growing dim and red. The final images were the most disturbing. They showed the inhabitants of this world working desperately on some kind of great project. Massive machines being built, complex rituals being performed, and finally what looked like the entire population entering some kind of suspended animation chambers. Lisa spent hours studying the images, trying to understand what had happened here. Whatever these beings had been working on, they had not finished it in time. The planet had died anyway, and they had died with it. But their machines were still here, still powered, still waiting. She set up her shelter in one of the living quarters, and used the alien furniture to make herself as comfortable as possible. The room was warm enough that she could remove her environmental suit for short periods, which was a relief after hours of wearing it. As she ate her first meal on the dead world, Lisa began to form a plan. She had found shelter and water. If she could figure out how to operate some of these alien machines, she might be able to find or create food. Maybe even find a way to signal for help. Though she knew rescue was probably impossible. But first, she needed to understand what this place was and what its builders had been trying to accomplish. The answer might be the key to her survival on this world that was supposed to be her grave. 3 months on Cathara Prime had changed Lisa in ways she never expected. Her hands were calloused now, from working with alien tools and machinery. Her body was leaner and stronger from the constant physical demands of survival. But most importantly, her mind had adapted to thinking in ways that would have seemed impossible back on Earth. She stood in the central chamber of the complex, watching as the ancient systems responded to her commands. It had taken weeks of careful experimentation to figure out how the alien interfaces worked. The beings who built this place had used a combination of touch, sound, and something that felt almost like thought to control their machines. Lisa had learned to mimic these inputs through patient trial and error. The breakthrough had come when she realized the complex was not just a shelter or research facility. It was a planetary restoration system designed to bring dead worlds back to life. The alien civilization had not been trying to save themselves when their world died. They had been building a gift for whoever came after them. Lisa activated another sequence of commands and watched as displays throughout the chamber lit up with information. The alien writing was still mostly meaningless to her, but she had learned to read the symbols that represented basic concepts like power, water, atmosphere, and life. The machines were showing her a map of Cathara Prime with thousands of locations marked across the surface. Each mark represented another facility, like the one she was in. a network of restoration sites that could work together to transform the planet. Most of them were dormant, their power cells drained by centuries of waiting, but they could be reactivated if someone knew how to do it properly. Over the past month, Lisa had managed to bring 3 of the closest sites online. The process was exhausting and dangerous. She had to physically travel to each location, sometimes across dozens of kilometers of hostile terrain. Once there, she had to solve the puzzle of each facility's specific systems and figure out how to restart them safely. But the results were worth the effort. The first site she activated had been an atmosphere processor. Within days, she could detect measurable increases in oxygen levels around her base. The second site controlled water extraction and distribution. Ancient pumps had begun drawing moisture from deep underground reservoirs and releasing it into the air as vapor. The third site was some kind of biological laboratory that had started producing basic organic compounds. Lisa climbed to the surface of her base complex and looked out across the landscape that was slowly coming back to life. Where once there had been only barren rock, she could now see patches of green where primitive plants were beginning to grow. The air was still too thin to breathe safely, but her instruments showed it was improving every day. More importantly, she was no longer alone. The biological systems had awakened microscopic life that had been dormant in the planet's crust for centuries. These tiny organisms were beginning the slow work of rebuilding Kithara Prime's ecosystem. Lisa had found ways to accelerate the process, using techniques she learned from studying the alien manuals and combining them with her own knowledge of Earth biology. She had also solved her food problem by learning to operate the complex's fabrication systems. These machines could take basic organic compounds and restructure them into anything from simple proteins to complex vitamins. The food they produced was not exactly appetizing, but it was nutritious and safe. More importantly, it was renewable, as long as the biological processors kept working. But Lisa's greatest discovery had come just 2 weeks ago. Deep in the restricted sections of the complex, she had found the communication center, a room filled with equipment that could send signals across incredible distances. Not just radio waves, but some kind of faster-than-light transmission system that the aliens had used to coordinate their restoration. Network across multiple star systems, the revelation had been staggering. Kithara Prime was not unique. There were dozens of other dead worlds with similar restoration systems, all connected by this communication network. Some were in territory controlled by the hegemony. Others were in unexplored regions of space. A few were relatively close to Earth's location. Lisa had spent days learning to operate the communication system. The alien interface was more complex than anything else she had encountered, requiring her to think in patterns that hurt her brain. But eventually, she had managed to send her first message to the network, a simple signal announcing that Kithara Prime's restoration had begun and requesting status updates from other sites. The responses had been immediate and overwhelming. 17 other worlds had answered her call. Some were completely dead, like Kithara Prime had been. Others were partially restored but abandoned. 3 were actually inhabited by species that had discovered the restoration systems and learned to use them for their own purposes. But the most shocking response had come from a world deep in hegemony space. The message was in broken but recognizable English, sent by a group of rebels who had been fighting the alien confederation for decades. They had found one of the restoration worlds and used its technology to build weapons and ships. They were offering to share information about hegemony military capabilities in exchange for help activating more restoration sites. Lisa realized that she had stumbled onto something much bigger than just her own survival. The alien civilization that had built these systems had created a network that could shift the balance of power across the entire galaxy. In the right hands, the restoration technology could transform dead worlds into thriving bases for resistance. Movement stopped. She began working 18-hour days to bring more sites online. Each new facility added to Cathara Prime's growing capabilities. Atmosphere processors increased air quality. Manufacturing systems produced advanced materials. Defensive installations came online to protect the restored areas from threats. Lisa also began experimenting with the more advanced technologies she found in the deeper levels of the complex. Gravity manipulators that could move massive objects with minimal effort. Matter converters that could transmute one element into another. Energy systems that drew power directly from the planet's magnetic field. The learning curve was steep and dangerous. Several times, her experiments had nearly killed her when alien systems reacted in unexpected ways, but each success taught her more about how the technology worked and how it could be adapted for human use. 1 month ago, Lisa had been a castaway struggling to survive on a dead planet. Now she was becoming something else entirely. Part engineer, part scientist, part archaeologist, and part warrior. The alien technology was changing her understanding of what was possible, pushing her to think beyond the limitations of human science. The transformation of Cathara Prime was accelerating. The planet now had breathable atmosphere in a growing zone around her base. Primitive forests were taking root in areas where the soil had been enriched by biological processors. Lakes and rivers were forming as the water extraction systems reached full capacity. But Lisa knew her work was just beginning. The communication network had shown her that the hegemony was aware something was happening on Cathara Prime. Their scout ships had been detected at the edge of the system, probing the planet's defenses and trying to understand what had changed. She also knew that her friends on the Defiant would be wondering what had happened to her. If Captain Blake was following standard procedures, he would have reported the first contact situation to Earth Command. There might already be rescue missions being planned, though any ship from Earth would take years to reach this far into space. Lisa activated the long-range communication array and began composing a message that would change everything. Not a distress call, but something far more powerful. A declaration that would echo across the galaxy and announce to every oppressed species that the age of the hegemony was coming to an end. As she worked on the message, Lisa smiled for the first time in months. The aliens who had abandoned her here had thought they were sending her to die on a dead world. Instead, they had given her the keys to technologies that could reshape civilization itself. The dead planet was coming back to life, and she was going to make sure the entire galaxy knew about it. The message Lisa sent out into the galaxy was simple, but it carried the power to change everything. She had spent 3 days crafting it carefully, making sure every word would be understood by any species that received it. The alien communication system could translate languages automatically, but she wanted her meaning to be crystal clear. This is Lieutenant Commander Lisa Martinez of the human species, broadcasting from the restored world of Cathara Prime. To all beings who seek freedom from oppression, who dream of worlds where they can live without fear, who believe that technology should serve life instead of destroying it, I offer you hope. The ancient restoration network is active again. Dead worlds can live. Broken civilizations can be rebuilt. The age of tyrants is ending. Along with the message, she transmitted detailed technical specifications for activating restoration sites. Star charts showing the locations of 47 confirmed dead worlds with intact systems and complete blueprints for the defensive technologies she had learned to build. She sent it on every frequency the alien system could access, repeating it in a continuous broadcast that would reach every corner of known space. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, signals were pouring in from across the galaxy. Oppressed species under hegemony rule, rebel groups hiding in asteroid fields, and even some neutral civilizations that had been staying out of galactic politics. All of them wanted to know more about the human who had awakened the ancient network, but Lisa's broadcast had also attracted attention from the hegemony itself. 3 days after she sent her message, long-range sensors detected a massive fleet, heading toward Cathara Prime. 200 ships, including some of the largest battle cruisers in hegemony service. They were not coming to investigate or negotiate. They were coming to destroy her and everything she had built. Lisa stood in the Planetary Defense Center, watching displays that showed the approaching fleet. She had 6 months to prepare for this moment, and she intended to use every advantage the restored planet could give her. The defensive systems of Cathara Prime were beyond anything the hegemony had ever encountered. Built by a civilization that had mastered technologies they could barely understand, the planet's primary defense grid consisted of orbital platforms that could focus energy beams with pinpoint accuracy. These were not simple laser weapons, but devices that could manipulate matter at the atomic level, disassembling enemy ships molecule by molecule. The platforms were invisible to normal sensors, hidden by the same technology that had kept the restoration sites concealed for centuries. Beneath the surface, massive shield generators created protective barriers that could deflect any weapon the hegemony possessed. The shields drew power directly from the planet's core, giving them effectively unlimited energy. Even if the enemy managed to maintain a bombardment for days, the shields would not fail. But Lisa's most powerful weapon was information. The alien databases contained detailed records of every species in the galaxy, including complete technical specifications for all their technologies. She knew exactly how hegemony ships were built, what their weaknesses were, and how to exploit them. More importantly, she knew the dark history of how the hegemony had conquered and enslaved the species that made up their confederation. 2 days before the fleet arrived, Lisa began broadcasting this information directly to the hegemony ships, not to their command frequencies, but to the personal communication devices carried by individual crew members. She told each species the truth about their own history, how their leaders had sold them into slavery, how their technologies had been stolen, how their people had been used as cannon fodder in hegemony wars. The effect was immediate and devastating. Mutinies broke out on dozens of ships as crew members learned that they had been fighting to preserve the very system that oppressed them. Some vessels turned away from the fleet and headed for neutral space. Others began attacking their former allies. The carefully organized invasion force dissolved into chaos before it even reached Kitbara, Prime's defensive perimeter. But Zexthera, the hegemony commander who had originally condemned Lisa to die on this world, was not easily deterred. He maintained control of about half the fleet and pressed forward with the attack. His flagship was one of the most powerful vessels ever built, armed with weapons that could crack a planet's crust and shielded by barriers that had never been penetrated. When the battle began, Lisa was ready. The orbital defense platforms opened fire with weapons that made the enemy's most powerful guns look like toys. Hegemony ships simply vanished as their atomic structures were unraveled by focused energy beams. But Zexthora's flagship proved surprisingly durable, its shields deflecting attacks that should have destroyed it instantly. Lisa realized that the hegemony had been reverse engineering ancient technology for longer than anyone suspected. Zex's ship incorporated defensive systems stolen from other restoration worlds, making it nearly as tough as the installations Lisa controlled. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. With weapons and technologies that could reshape reality itself, the fight raged for hours across the space around Cathara Prime. Lisa used every trick she had learned from studying the alien systems. She turned asteroids into guided missiles, created gravity wells that crushed enemy ships, and even opened temporary wormholes that transported hegemony vessels into the heart of nearby stars. But Zexthera was cunning and experienced. He had been fighting wars for centuries and knew how to adapt to unexpected situations. His ship dodged Lisa's most powerful attacks and managed to penetrate the outer layers of the planetary defense grid. For a terrifying moment, it looked like he might actually reach the surface and destroy the restoration complex. That was when Lisa played her final card. She had discovered that the communication network did more than just send messages between worlds. It could also be used to coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. With a single command, she activated defensive installations on 17 other restoration worlds, all of them targeting the space around Cathara Prime. The combined firepower of 18 planetary defense grids focused on Zexthara's flagship was too much for even stolen ancient technology to withstand. The massive ship was torn apart by energy beams that arrived through dimensional rifts, its destruction so complete that not even debris remained. The surviving hegemony ships fled in all directions, their crews broadcasting surrender messages and requests for mercy. Lisa could have destroyed them all with ease, but instead, she offered them something the hegemony had never given to anyone: a choice. You can return to your masters and tell them what happened here, she broadcast to the fleeing ships, or you can join the species who are already working to build something better. The Restoration Network is open to all who seek peace. We do not conquer worlds, we give them life. We do not enslave peoples, we offer them freedom. The choice is yours to make. Most of the ships chose freedom. Within days, former hegemony vessels were arriving at restoration worlds across the galaxy, their crews eager to learn about the technologies that could transform dead planets into thriving homes. The rebellion Lisa had started was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined, but the real victory was not military. It was the message that echoed across every communication network in known space, carried by the survivors of the battle, and broadcast by the restoration worlds themselves. The message was simple, but revolutionary. The hegemony could be defeated. Oppressed species could fight back, and ancient technologies could be used to build instead of destroy. Lisa stood on the surface of Cathara Prime, breathing air that smelled of growing plants and fresh water. 6 months ago, this had been a dead world, meant to be her grave. Now it was the birthplace of a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. The woman the aliens had sent here to die had become the architect of their greatest defeat. The transformation was just beginning, but Lisa knew there was no going back now. The galaxy would never be the same again. The used Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathara system and immediately detected readings that made no sense at all. Captain John Blake stared at his instruments in disbelief. The dead world where they had left Lisa Martinez 6 months ago was now showing massive energy signatures, atmospheric activity, and what appeared to be artificial structures across its entire surface. "Sir, I'm reading breathable atmosphere across 60% of the planet," Danny Rodriguez reported from his station. His voice was tight with emotion. "There are forests, lakes, even what looks like cities being built. This can't be the same world." Blake had spent the past 6 months haunted by the decision to leave Lisa behind. He had filed his report with Earth Command, describing humanity's first contact with hostile alien forces and the sacrifice his chief engineer had made to save the crew. The response from Earth had been immediate: return to Cathara Prime with the fastest ship available and attempt a rescue mission. No matter how unlikely success might be, the journey back had taken 4 months, even with upgraded engines and a direct route. Blake had tried not to think about what they would find when they arrived. In his darkest moments, he expected to discover Lisa's body preserved by the cold atmosphere of the dead world. In his most optimistic fantasies, he hoped she might have found some shelter and managed to survive long enough for rescue. He had never imagined anything like this. The planet below them was alive in ways that seemed impossible, but the most shocking discovery came when the communication system activated on its own, and a familiar voice filled the bridge. "Captain Blake, this is Lisa Martinez welcoming you to New Terra, formerly known as Cathara Prime. I hope you brought more crew members this time, because we're going to need all the help we can get." The bridge erupted in cheers and shouts of joy. Danny was wiping tears from his eyes. Even Blake felt his composure crack as relief flooded through him. Lisa was alive, and from the sound of her voice, She was doing more than just surviving. "Lisa, thank God," Blake managed to say into the communicator. "We thought we had lost you. How is any of this possible?" "It's a long story, Captain, and I'll explain everything once you're on the surface. But first, you should know that we're not alone down here. I've got representatives from 12 different species who are very interested in meeting humans. Also, there's a small fleet of former hegemony ships in orbit on the far side of the planet. They're friendly now, but you might want to approach slowly to avoid any misunderstandings." Blake looked around the bridge at his crew members, who were all staring at him with expressions of amazement and confusion. The woman they had left to die on a barren rock had somehow transformed it into a thriving world and apparently started some kind of interstellar alliance. The implications were staggering. The landing coordinates Lisa provided led them to a sprawling complex of buildings that seemed to blend alien architecture with human engineering principles. As the Defiant settled onto a landing pad that had definitely not existed 6 months ago, Blake could see gardens and parks stretching to the horizon. The air outside was clean and sweet, filled with the sounds of birds and flowing water. Lisa was waiting for them at the landing pad, but she looked different than Blake remembered. She was tanned and lean, her hair longer, and her eyes holding a confidence that had not been there before. She wore clothes that appeared to be made from materials he did not recognize, and there was some kind of device on her wrist that occasionally glowed with soft light. "Welcome to New Terra," she said as Blake and his crew stepped off the ship. "I hope you're ready for a tour, because there's a lot to see." The next few hours were a whirlwind of impossible sights and revelations. Lisa showed them through the restored alien complex, where she had learned to operate technologies that were centuries ahead of human science. She explained how she had discovered the planetary restoration network and used it to bring Prime back to life. But the real shock came when she introduced them to the aliens who were working alongside her. These were not the hostile creatures they had encountered with the hegemony, but beings from dozens of species who had joined the restoration project. Some were refugees from hegemony oppression. Others were explorers and scientists who had heard about the ancient technology and come to learn. "The network spans the entire galaxy," Lisa explained as they walked through a laboratory where humans and aliens worked side by side on projects that Blake could barely comprehend. "There are 47 active restoration worlds now, with more coming online every day. Each one becomes a center for refugees, researchers, and anyone who wants to build something better than what the hegemony offered." She led them to the communication center where displays showed the locations of restoration worlds scattered across known space. Many were in territory that had once been controlled by the hegemony, but the Confederation was crumbling as more species learned the truth about their history and chose freedom over oppression. "What about Earth?" Blake asked. "Have you been in contact with home?" Lisa smiled and activated one of the displays. "Earth Command has been very interested in our progress here. I've been sending regular reports about the technology we've discovered and the political situation in this part of the galaxy. They're planning to send a diplomatic mission within the year." She paused and looked directly at Blake. "Captain, humanity is about to become a major player in galactic politics, whether we want to or not. The restoration technology gives us capabilities that most species can only dream of. But more importantly, we've proven that it's possible to stand up to oppressors, like the hegemony, and win." Blake spent the next several days learning about everything Lisa had accomplished. She had not just survived on the dead world. She had become a leader in a galactic revolution. The complex on New Terra was now a hub for communication and coordination between dozens of restoration worlds. Ships arrived daily, bringing refugees, supplies, and information about hegemony activities. But perhaps the most impressive thing was how Lisa had adapted to her role as humanity's first interstellar diplomat. She spoke with alien leaders as equals, negotiated agreements that benefited multiple species, and somehow managed to keep the growing alliance focused on building rather than destroying. I had a lot of time to think during those first few weeks, she told Blake one evening as they walked through gardens that now covered much of the planet's surface. About what kind of future we want to build, about what it means to be human in a galaxy full of other intelligent species. The hegemony ruled through fear and oppression. We're proving that cooperation and mutual respect work better. Blake watched as children from half a dozen species played together in parks that had not existed 6 months ago. It was a sight that would have been impossible under hegemony rule, where different species were kept separate and hostile. When we return to Earth, what message should we carry? Blake asked. Lisa looked up at the stars that were just becoming visible in the evening sky. Many of those points of light now represented worlds where former slaves were building new lives, where dead planets were coming back to life, where the dream of freedom was becoming reality. Tell them that humanity has found its place among the stars, she said. Tell them that we stand with all who seek peace and freedom. Tell them that the dead world, where they send me to die, has become the birthplace of a new age. Blake nodded, understanding that when the Defiant returned to Earth, it would carry more than just news of Lisa's survival. It would carry word of humanity's emergence as a galactic power, of technologies that could transform civilization, and of alliances that would reshape the balance of power across known space. The flag planted by human hands on the restored world would become a symbol of hope for oppressed species everywhere. The message Lisa had crafted would echo across the galaxy for generations to come, and the woman who had been sent to die on a dead planet would be remembered as the architect of humanity's greatest triumph among the stars.